Tavon Austin's rookie year, I drafted him as my wide receiver too. And I was like, I'm cool with this because everyone's saying that I should be fucking cool with this. And I sucked that year so hard for a bunch of other reasons. But this is the same idea, I feel like.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. Yeah. So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. My name is Nick Walsh. I am here once again with Matt Rogers. What's up, Rogers?
What is up, Walsh?
Not much, dude. We're going to get into some teams in this podcast. We're going to talk about some NFC North teams. But first, we are going to give a shout out to ViewPick, the revolutionary app that allows you to play fantasy football live while watching the game on TV. Predict the plays, the result of the play, and literally play fantasy football. You can sign up for the beta now by going to letstalkfantasyfootball.com/viewpick. That's VUPIQ. All right, man, so we're going to get into part 2 of the NFC North podcast here. We're going to talk about those Detroit Lions and those Minnesota Vikings. First, though, I would like to say we do have an Android app and an iOS app out, both of them out now. They are live. You can find out more about those at letstalkfantasyfootball.com/Apple and letstalkfantasyfootball.com/Android. They're great. They let you know ADPs. You can ask questions. You can find the podcasts. They're pretty useful stuff. So, Rogers, what are your thoughts here? What do you think about these NFC North teams that we're going to get into?
Well, we already covered the Packers, so this is obviously the lesser half and least interesting podcast. Sort of how you and me are the more interesting fantasy podcast duo as opposed to the other guys that are more boring. That'll come next week.
Right. So it's the less interesting podcast from the more interesting duo. I think is the way to sum that up. I think that I probably said that really loud because I was leaning over to pick up a beer and I got really close to my microphone. Anyway.
I don't think you could ever say it loud enough. So it's fine.
Sorry if that got really loud in your ear for a minute there. That was an error on the part of this professional broadcaster. Anyway, we're going to start, I believe, with the Lions. So the Lions, to me, are very, very interesting for a number of reasons. One of the least interesting, I think, parts of the team is Matthew Stafford. He's going with the 11th pick of the 10th round. He's QB 14. To me, he's just such a whatever pick. Like, we know his general range of outcomes and what it's been. Like, he's fine for his floor. They've also switched to more of a quick passing game in the past couple of years that sort of limited him as a fantasy quarterback. I don't know. What do you think about Stafford?
Yeah, I mean, they're always going to throw. I think they're like top 5 in pass percent plays probably every single year, or at least the past 3 or 4 years. I know they are. Stafford, yeah, he's high-end streamable, lowest of quarterback one, I would say. I mean, he's been pretty healthy lately. That's always good. But I'm not down with his floor, actually. I think last year he had 9 games with less than 2 touchdowns last year. So that floor is, not ideal. I mean, for that value, that floor is fine. But that's why I put him in that streamable matchup-based sort of range for me.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I don't really have strong opinions on him one way or the other. While we're on him, though, let's get into the interesting part of this team, or at least the interesting part for me, and that's the passing targets. We can talk about the running game a little bit later, but the Lions have some interesting wide receivers, and they do have Eric Ebron at tight end. I don't know if necessarily you're prepared to answer this or what, but the most interesting thing about this passing attack for me, there's 2 things. One, is it going to be more like weeks 1 through 5 where Marvin Jones was the guy on that team, or is it going to be more like weeks 6 through 16 where Golden Tate was more the guy? And then 2, Anquan Boldin last year had 24 red zone targets, 8 touchdowns, and he had 96, I believe, targets overall.
Yep.
where are those getting spread out to? Because they don't have just one guy who's necessarily his replacement. So talk to me a little bit first about Golden Tate versus Marvin Jones, and then we can get into the other one as well.
All right, so I'll start off with this, is that there will be value in this receiving. Like you said, Ebron, even in the backfield, Tate, Marvin Jones, it'll be there. I think Kenny Golladay, by the way, the rookie going above Marvin Jones in drafts right now?
I don't think he's going. Am I wrong there?
I saw he was going in the 14th round in like the mid 60s, and I think I missed Marvin Jones, but whatever.
No, Marvin Jones is in the 10th right now.
Oh, okay, then I must just gloss right over that. I apologize. I want none of this Lions wide receiver core at all. Personally.
Okay.
As a guy last year that in my two most valued leagues owned Marvin Jones in one and Golden Tate in the other, it was the most frustrating thing in the entire world. So Golden Tate on the surface looks good. Since he's been with the Lions, he averages 90 receptions and like almost 1,100 yards per year in 3 seasons with Detroit. And that's pretty good. But it's very week to week. His lows in the beginning screwed people last year, me especially with that. It was like a tale of two shitty, weird Lions receivers where one league, Marvin Jones started off hot, and I stuck with him way too long, and he screwed me. And the other one, Golden Tate, started off completely shitty, and I held on way, way too long and then bailed when he got good. So the whole thing just frustrates me. I think it'll be very inconsistent as far as where it goes. I think, if anything, the guy that benefits the most from the Bolden departure, which is definitely huge with the target share, like you said, and red zone targets, is Eric Ebron, who's been trending up throughout his entire career in pretty much every offensive tight end stat. So I don't want either of these wide receivers on the Lions. What are your thoughts on them? Because I am curious.
So I'm more into Marvin Jones than Golden Tate at the prices that they're at, which for reference, Golden Tate is 4.12, wide receiver 25. Marvin Jones is – sorry.
No, I'm saying that's ridiculous. I was just commenting.
Oh, yeah. And then Marvin Jones is 10.01, wide receiver 45. So way more affordable in terms of taking a shot on a guy. One thing I'd like to mention that I thought was very interesting, and again, this is a nugget of information from Matt Harmon at NFL.com. What he said is that Marvin Jones, after those first couple of weeks, started seeing the most press coverage of any wide receiver in the NFL, and it worked. Apparently, when he gets pressed at the line, he can't get off the line. He can't get a clean release, which kind of makes sense intuitively because he's kind of a tall, skinny guy. But apparently, when cornerbacks try and jam him, try and press him off the line, he gets shook, and it affects his game. So I know for me, there was a lot of wondering last year, like why they got away from Marvin Jones, what happened to him, was it the Lions' choice? And what that says is that no, it wasn't really the Lions' choice. It was sort of just they had to because he couldn't deal with press coverage. Now, what I'm wondering is, did he spend the offseason working on it? Are other teams going to adjust, maybe play him a little bit less like that? Those are all things that we have to kind of keep an eye on. But I'm kind of willing to take the risk on him just because maybe he did work on that. Maybe he did put on a little bit of strength, work on his footwork in terms of getting out of that press coverage. And maybe he can get past that and become more of the Marvin Jones we saw in the first couple of weeks last year. I think at the first pick in the 10th round, I'm very willing to take that risk.
I agree. As far as prices go, Marvin Jones is without a doubt the better value. I would not feel comfortable at all with Golden Tate as my running back, as my wide receiver 2 or even 3, personally. Here's an interesting stat I found earlier. Golden Tate, right, last year had 7 double-digit target games. 5 of those games were the 5 games that Theo Riddick was injured and out. Another one was where Theo Riddick got hurt in game, and the other one was overtime. So the only time last year that Golden Tate saw double-digit targets was either in overtime games or when Theo Riddick was not in the field. And that's
also no. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that to me is a huge concern because that's pretty concrete right there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's also without Abdullah, who we know can, take some passing work close to the line of scrimmage as well. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons to be cautious on Golden Tate. I personally like Marvin Jones at that late round price. Let's talk a little bit about Kenny Golladay because you did bring him up. You said he's going in the 14th?
Yeah, I saw 3rd pick of the 14th round as wide receiver 66.
Okay, and this is a guy he was their third round pick out of Northern Illinois. He is 6'4" and he is 218 pounds. So to me, what that screams is a guy who you can use as a specialty player in red zone early in his career. So that kind of addresses some of that Anquan Boldin talk we were saying before, where are these red zone targets going to go? How big of a role do you think Kenny Golladay is going to have? And do you think it's worth anything in fantasy, or is it kind of just the dude who you get pissed at for stealing touchdowns?
That's possible. What I'll say is I'm not really sure what his definitive role is going to be. I can't speak to that right now. But if we're talking at that price in the 14th round, I'll say we talked on the last podcast about how the Packers have a lot of mouths to feed. So it'll be hard as you go deeper into their fantasy relevant pass catchers where you can value them because there's so many mouths to feed. I think the case is the same with the Lions, but the quality is so much lower. So I like Kenny Golladay as a late-round flyer solely because he has the best chance of a lot of late-round flyers to potentially be the number one target in that offense by week 7. In the red zone, possibly. Would you potentially agree with that? I mean, I'm not going to break out other offenses and guys right now, but for instance, he has a more decent chance of being the best target on the Lions than Randall Cobb does for the Packers.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
His in talks of upside is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely upside there. I think I don't know how much he's going to be used between the 20s. And out of training camp so far, they're saying guy's a monster in the red zone, which is great. But we'll see how that really translates. He's a guy to keep an eye on in preseason, though. He's probably going to have a couple spectacular touchdown catches just because he's 6'4", 218, and has a my ball mentality. So just keep an eye on him, and don't hesitate to throw a late round flyer on him. Let's talk a little bit about Ebron. And I'm spoiling the punchline to this or spoiling the answer to this. But if I told you a guy was 24 years old, was drafted in the top 10 overall, number 1 at his position in the actual NFL draft, not a fantasy draft, and had increased every year of his career in targets, catch rate, and yards, would you tell me that's a guy that you wanted to draft?
I'd be like tight end 4.
Yeah, that's Eric Ebron. He's 24 years old, which everyone seems to think he's been around forever and this is what he is. He's a 24-year-old who was the number 10 overall pick in the draft. He's gone from 47 to 70 to 85 targets last year. He's increased his catch rate every single year. He's increased his total yards every single year. I get that maybe he's not the red zone monster that people thought he was going to be, but this is a guy who could – Anquan Boldin is giving up 96 targets. If Ebron soaks up 15 of them, you're up to 100 targets for him. He only had 1 touchdown last year. He had 5 touchdowns the year before. We're talking about a guy who could be a 100 to 110 target tight end who is likely going to see some positive regression in terms of touchdowns. Say he gets up to 4 or 5 touchdowns. That's a fucking great year for a tight end. I don't get why everyone is so sour on Ebron.
In 3 years, I think touchdown-wise, people will look at 2016 as the outlier for Eric Ebron, for sure.
That's very fair.
To piggyback off your point of where he is at his age and how he's improving constantly, through their 23-year-old season, there's been 5 tight ends in history that have caught more passes than Eric Ebron. And those tight ends are Gronk, Jason Witten, Tony Gonzalez, Aaron Hernandez, and Todd Heap.
Yeesh.
That's crazy. And that certainly should be credited to the fact that the Lions throw the ball a lot, but there's no indication that's going to change. He's trending upwards. The touchdowns will definitely come. You're right. Reverse regression. I would rather have Eric Ebron than Martellus Bennett this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I would 100% be on that.
I would put PPR Ebron floor at 7 points per week.
Yeah, I think that's fair because I think he's going to get 6 to 7 targets a week. So
right.
Yeah, it's and I know a lot of the argument there is well, the Lions have shown they like other people in the red zone more. which like is fine. We don't need Ebron to be a 10 touchdown guy. We just need his, if he takes 6 of Anquan Bolden's 24 red zone targets and the rest go to like Kenny Golladay or like Darren Fells, their number 2 tight end, or Michael Roberts, who they drafted at tight end, who's like a nice red zone guy but isn't going to play between the 20s. Like, that's fine. All of that's fine. All we need is a little bit of positive aggression from Ebron for him to really exceed his price. So, yeah, I'm all in on Ebron this year.
Right, and even if he doesn't get 6 of those touchdowns and he only gets 2, he's tight end 8 at the end of the year.
Pretty much. Just based on the targets. I will say one thing, too. He hasn't played a full 16 games. So there's that to deal with. But, I mean –
but at that price, that's the tight end roulette range anyway, so it's totally worth it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, so we've gushed over Ebron enough, I suppose. Let's talk a little bit about their running game. We have Amir Abdullah. He's going 5.08, running back 23. We have Theo Riddick, excuse me. He's going 7.07, so about 2 rounds later. That's running back 33. We also have Zach Zenner still on the roster, Dwayne Washington still on the roster. Washington, I don't expect to make an impact. Zenner could do a little bit of vulturing and a little bit of annoying things for owners of Abdullah in particular. But what are your thoughts on Abdullah at that price, and then I guess conversely Riddick at that price?
They also sneaky signed Matt Asiata as well.
Yeah, I don't give a fuck about that.
No, I don't give a fuck about it. But I'm just saying is weird in that backfield again.
Yeah, that's fair.
Abdullah, there's his price is all right, but there's way more mystery in him than a lot of the other guys were worried about price on. I'll be honest, I don't really know much about it. All I hear is they want to give him a expanded role, but he's always heard Theo Riddick is a passing down guy, which is pretty much definite. And that's also what's weird about Abdullah is that's a skill of Abdullah's as well. When he had decent years, we saw him catch the ball effectively. So the fact that that's always going to be Theo Riddick while he's there, Abdullah's probably the least likely candidate for goal line work. Would you agree?
I don't know about least likely, but
maybe not least likely. But I mean, he's the least to me, other than Riddick, like a ground and punch it in from the 2 type guy on that roster.
And the fact that you're saying that is a huge reason to be cautious on him, because you can't draft a guy who's strictly a between the 20s running guy in the 5th round. Like, you just can't do it, No,
it's crazy, especially when if they get down, it's going to be Theo Riddick all day. Like, if you owned any Lion running back ever, back to fucking Mikel LaShore, you've seen that happen, where it's just like, why is he not on the field? Why is my dude not on the field? Like, they just do it that way when they're down. It'll be infuriating, I would think.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I know when we started our mock draft earlier this year and whatever else, I was pretty bullish on Abdullah, and the more research I do, the more I really critically think about it, the less I want to own a guy who's potentially going to be 15 carries for 70 yards most week. Like, that's the worst kind of guy to own, maybe.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Maybe like a couple catches, like maybe 5 touchdowns on the year. It's just like, that's a guy you don't want to own at all.
There's better pass catching backs on that team, and there's potentially better goal line backs on that team. And even if he's the starter, that sucks. I'm fine with owning Abdullah as long as I'm not starting him week 1.
Okay, that's fair. Because Abdullah, the other thing with him, like, we're poo-pooing him, I think deservedly so. But the other thing is, if he earns a role where he's getting a decent amount of work in the passing game and maybe getting a couple goal line carries, like, could be a great value. That's like you were saying, he's such an unknown at this time, that it's hard to really pinpoint his value.
I just look at it as if you take him in the 5th round, then week 1 he is in your lineup. And to me, I'm not comfortable with that at all. He could possibly deserve it all year after 2 weeks or something like that, but that's not a risk I'm willing to take personally.
Yeah, I'm thinking more and more that I'm not either. What about Riddick in the 7th? Do you think that's a value you can get down with, or?
Yeah, in PPR formats for sure. I think that week one, back to that point, I would be more comfortable starting Theo Riddick than I would Amir Abdullah. Just because the Lions are always throwing, they always seem to be down. I mean, last year they had a weird situation with all those come-from-behind wins or just like fourth-quarter shootouts, if you remember that.
Yeah.
So I just – Theo Riddick, especially at the price, the two-round price difference is huge. It's a toss-up to me who could have a better year statistically. So at a two-round price, if I'm going to own one of them, it's Theo Riddick every time.
Yeah, that's the right way to look at it. I think Zach Zenner is a guy worth keeping an eye on, or like if they keep Matt Asiata or whatever, which I don't think they're gonna. But I mean, if Matt Asiata gets cut, which I think and hope he will, I think Zach Zenner is an interesting guy to keep an eye on in deeper leagues, maybe just because if Abdullah goes down, he's likely going to take that goal line work, maybe some of that first and second down work.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. You got anything else on the Lions, or should we move on to the Vikings?
Yeah, no, nothing else on them.
All right. Before we move on to the Vikings, though, let's hear real quick from ViewPick.
This year, dominate your friends with free play-by-play fantasy football from ViewPick. ViewPick is the first play-to-play fantasy football game where you crush your friends from the comfort of your own couch. For the first time in fantasy football, you must think like the players and coaches on the field as you predict the outcome of every play. Visit viewpick.com. VUPIQ.com and sign up now for an invitation to beta test.
All right, so that was ViewPick, and we are back with the Vikings. Interesting team. I don't know what to make of them this year. I guess we'll start with the quarterback situation. Sam Bradford is entrenched as the starter, and to my surprise, is getting drafted. He's currently 14.03, quarterback 21. Would you draft Sam Bradford?
You said quarterback 21, like a 2-quarterback league, I guess. But
yeah, in a 2 QB league, yeah, sure. But like,
I think even if you're like in a 16-team league, there's better options there. I would hope at the last pick of the draft, unless a lot of people are doubling up. But I mean, it'd be fine, but no.
There's just like zero upside in my mind, but.
Yeah. A bunch of just like one-word ambiguous responses. Be like, no, maybe, over and over.
Yeah, pretty much. Just play that on a loop for the rest of the podcast. So with that being said, the Vikings do have some interesting situations, and it's because they've brought in a couple running backs, and then because their wide receivers weren't healthy at all last year. So let's start with the running backs. The first one off the board is rookie Dalvin Cook, second-round pick for the Vikings. In fantasy drafts, he's going 4.08, and that is running back 19. You also have Latavius Murray going 11.03, running back 49. Jerick McKinnon is not getting drafted. Talk to me starting with Dalvin Cook, Rogers.
All right, so I'll preface it by saying that every year when I start to get into fantasy, like end of July, right, like ish, I always like to do my own rankings without looking at any other professionals' rankings and just kind of figure it out based on my own knowledge and be like, we'll go forward from here. So I did my rankings this year, and like it took way too long, and definitely they were wrong. But at the end, and I looked at other professionals' rankings, this Vikings backfield has me legitimately terrified that I just know nothing about football whatsoever. Because Dalvin Cook's going as like a running back 2, and I have him at like 52 in my preseason, like my initial thought. So I just assume constantly that I'm missing something. And I get the Latavius Murray concerns or whatever, but this Dalvin Cook price to me, dude, I can't justify it, even as I read up everything that I can on him and their whole situation.
Yeah, the Dalvin Cook price is pretty egregious to me, and that's with Latavius Murray only coming off the PUP list today. So, I mean, for perspective, he's jumped about 2 rounds since mid-July. He was late, mid to late 6th round before that. This is a guy who great on the field in college, bad measurables. By most accounts, not a great pass blocker, which I know you and I talked about this on our podcast recapping our mock draft a couple weeks ago. But to me, the thing that keeps rookie running backs off the field the most is not being able to pass block. And by all accounts, Dalvin Cook is not a good pass blocker. So if he's not a good pass blocker, he's not going to be on the field when the team is down because you need someone who can, if he can run routes, fine, but he's still got to block. Latavius Murray, good pass blocker. Jerick McKinnon, good pass blocker. Even with Murray being hurt till now, like they haven't even played a fucking preseason game yet, because Latavius was hurt till now doesn't really mean that much. So I know Dalvin Cook is a very talented running back. I know he has, the potential to be great in terms of eye-popping plays and whatever else. I don't see him being on the field for all 3 downs, and I don't see how you can draft him that high.
No, I would love to ask anybody that, whether it's mock drafts or if you, for whatever reason, had your actual league draft this early that took Dalvin Cook at that price, and I would just want to be like, why did you do that? Other than the fact that somebody told you to. Because it makes zero sense to me, right? I mean, they signed Latavius Murray big. You're talking about their O-line's not that good. It just makes no sense. I don't get what is being incorporated into the price. And
I didn't even mention that. The O-line fucking sucked ass last year. And I know they got 2 new tackles. They drafted a center in the 2nd round. I know what they did. I don't think that immediately makes them a good O-line. This is an O-line where Jerick McKinnon had the best yards per carry last year, and it was 3.4. Adrian Peterson had 2.8 when he was healthy. This is not a good offensive line. It's not a situation where he can play every down, it seems like. And what makes me it makes me think of the scene in Zoolander where Mugatu's, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because every blurb I see is Dalvin Cook is the number 1 running back on Minnesota's depth chart. He has the chance to really take this job and put in a great year. I'm just wait, what? Why is no one else at least cautious about this? Why is everyone just saying this is fine? It's not fine.
I feel like in a vacuum, if you just said they drafted this running back and they have a bad O-line, will probably be a team with a losing record, and also just signed a relatively effective veteran running back to big money. Do you think that dude's going to be great? You should be I don't really think so. No. So I don't get it,
And they still have a running back on the roster who got 150 carries and 50 targets last year.
Tavon Austin's rookie year, I drafted him as my wide receiver too. And I was I'm cool with this because everyone's saying that I should be fucking cool with this. And I sucked that year so hard for a bunch of other reasons. But this is the same idea, I feel like. At that price, he's your running back too. And you're just yeah, I'm going to roll out week 1 with Dalvin Cook just getting fucked up by – I got to see who they're playing. I hope it's someone bad. I mean, good, but a bad matchup.
Yeah. Just a really good defensive line.
Yeah, but yeah, man, I don't get it at all. If this is Dalvin Cook's price, even a full round later, I'm gonna not own any of it. And you know what's gonna happen then? He's gonna rush for 1,800 yards this year.
That sounds about right. Sounds about right.
I'm gonna be right. I don't get it, and they just constantly.
Yeah, no, I feel like
oh shit, they played the Saints week 1.
Ah shit, yeah.
Damn it.
Well, we'll see. It'll be a lot of Dalvin Cook truthers just being I told you so, and us being I don't know, and then by week 5 we'll be yeah. Hopefully, I don't know. Maybe we're just really wrong about this one, because I don't get. We're the only people who are don't fucking draft him this early.
But honestly, I think our reason is more justified because everyone else is saying draft him. Because, and we're just don't draft him because of that. Because it makes no sense. There's no reason there,
Yeah, I don't know, man. All right, let's move on from Dalvin Cook because we're clearly getting riled up. Latavius Murray at the 3rd pick in the 11th round, I'll draft him there.
Yeah, that's all I got. It's just because of my hate for the Dalvin Cook situation, I'm going to do it.
Well, I mean, Latavius is a big-bodied athlete who can pass block, can kind of catch out of the backfield occasionally, and teams seem to want to use him as a goal line back. So I wouldn't be surprised if he vultures some touchdowns at that sort of value. And if Cook can't pass block for shit, or like if Cook gets hurt, like all of a sudden you have a great value in Latavius Murray at that price.
He's got a resume. He averaged 4 yards per carry last year. If he's completely healthy, do you think that this is different going into the season, that the values are a little bit different? Or do you think people are making a big deal?
Totally. Yeah. If he hadn't been on the PUP list until literally today, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
What about McKinnon? He's not getting drafted. Do you think he should be, or?
I don't think he should. I think his role is pretty defined, even if Cook or Murray are injured for an extended period of time. I think that he's kind of in that niche of like a poor man's Darren Sproles potential, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. They also have Bishop Sankey on the roster.
Oh shit!
Blow up your draft boards, everybody. Bishop Sankey's on the Vikings.
Bishop Sankey and no kicker in our draft now.
All right, let's talk about their wide receivers. Stephon Diggs is going 5.12. That's wide receiver 30. Adam Thielen, 10.07. That is wide receiver 47. Laquan Treadwell not getting drafted. Jarius Wright is still there. Michael Floyd is there and suspended for the first 4 games. I feel like I'm kind of down with Diggs and Thielen. I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
I'm very down with those prices for sure. If I leave and I have 2 good running backs in my draft and Diggs ends up being my wide receiver 2, I'm cool with that for sure. Wide receiver 3, definitely. I mean, it's going to be his first full year in training camp with Sam Bradford and Pat Shurmur, and he's been looking better each year. Took over the role as kind of like a 1 sort of last year. I mean, Adam Thielen was running on the outside, but I definitely like Diggs and his week to week potential.
Yeah, I agree with that. At his best, he looked like a top 10 wide receiver in the league last year. And he struggled with some injuries throughout. Him and Thielen both only played, I think, 11 and 10 games. Laquan Treadwell only played 3 games last year. All word out of training camp is Treadwell is running with the starters when they have 3 wide receivers in. So does Treadwell interest you at all as a late-round flyer, or is he just kind of Sam Bradford isn't going to make it happen enough?
No, I can't remember the last time the Vikings had, like, more than 2, maybe Kyle Rudolph counts as a half, like, pass-catching relevant dudes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not drafting Treadwell either, so that's fine with me.
Way better than Flyers, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Let's move on to Kyle Rudolph, since you mentioned him. He is currently going as the 4th pick in the 8th round. That is the 9th tight end off the board. Kyle Rudolph last year was tight end 2.
What?
Yeah. Kyle Rudolph finished as tight end 2 behind Travis Kelce last year.
Wow, yeah. That's awesome.
What do you think about – well, you know what? I'm going to go first here because I have a lot of thoughts on Kyle Rudolph.
Literally, if you asked me, my thought was going to be like, oh, shit. Yeah.
So, and this is coming from a guy who was a Kyle Rudolph fucking truther coming out of college. Like, loved him, thought he was the next, like, great tight end, all of that. Turns out last year was only his age 27 season. That's not that bad. It was also a career high in targets. He had 132. His previous career high, I believe, was 73. So he almost doubled his previous career high. He had 7 touchdowns last year, so not the most that he's had in his career, but like his targets, his yardage, everything else completely made up for it. He was just legitimately a very good tight end, led all tight ends in targets last year. Now, here's the thing. Diggs and Thielen, as I said before, each missed at least 5 games. Laquan Treadwell only played 3 games. I don't know that Kyle Rudolph has – I shouldn't say that because he has the chance to. It was his first year with Sam Bradford. It's a new quarterback. It's whatever else. But from all fucking – appearances, Jesus Christ, from all appearances, it looks like they're trying to give the ball to the wide receivers a bit more and spread out that offense. So if they have 2 to 3 healthy wide receivers for the whole year, I can't see Kyle Rudolph repeating that kind of year. I'd see him more along the lines of 90 to 100 targets, maybe up to 110. That being said, he's still a very good red zone target, and I think they know that. So Kyle Rudolph, to me, holds more value in standard non-PPR leagues than he does in PPR, because I see his targets going down and his touchdowns remaining about the same or that sort of thing. I think I'd take him maybe tight end 7 or 8, so maybe a couple spots over his current draft position, but the discount is certainly warranted.
That was awesome. I love Kyle Rudolph now. But to your point, I mean, last year, now that I'm looking at it, he was like third.
Dude, he was like fucking great last year.
Third in tight end catches, like fourth in yards, and tied for second in touchdowns. That's crazy. So my point is, all right, let me ask you a question then on Kyle Rudolph before we wrap it up. Would you rather own Kyle Rudolph this year or Tyler Eifert?
Ew.
And let me ask you with it this way: is with Kyle Rudolph and his potential production that's consistent, and Tyler Eifert, whether it be injury history or the Bengals having weird games or whatever, based on price, is it better to solidify Kyle Rudolph as your every week guy if he's healthy no matter what, than taking that 3-round earlier buy on Eifert, and if it screws you, dipping all the way down to the Zach why can't I get his name? Zach Miller's of the world. You know what I mean? I'm curious.
So Eifert is going in the 6th round. I think I'd probably rather just solidify my floor at tight end with Kyle Rudolph than take Eifert in the 6th.
I think
and it's tough because Eifert's ceiling is huge, and it's a gigantic risk reward play, and it probably depends on the rest of your team construction a little bit as well. But yeah, it's outside of everything else, I think I'd rather have Kyle Rudolph at that price than Eifert at his.
I agree.
Which is weird.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. Eifert in the 6th round is a little bit crazy for me, but me and Vinny talked about that last week.
Yeah.
Podcast.
Yeah, that's certainly fair. Yeah, so now that I've ranted about Kyle Rudolph for a little while, do you have anything else on the Vikings?
Not really. I feel like I'm expected to say something about a kicker now, but definitely.
Who the fuck is – they don't have Cousin Blair anymore. I'm not sure who their kicker is.
I don't know who their kicker is, actually. It's probably Randy Bullock. I feel like it's always, whenever you don't know who a kicker is, it ends up being Randy Bullock.
Good call. You're probably right. So yeah, I think that'll do it for us and for the the NFC North. Guys, make sure get the apps, check it out. Again, that's letstalkfantasyfootball.com/Apple and letstalkfantasyfootball.com/Android. If you get the chance, if you listen to the podcast a lot, subscribe to us on iTunes, review us on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And as always, get fucking mocking. Do those mock drafts. Do the MFL 10s. Do whatever you're doing. Get yourselves prepared. Don't just listen to us. Go out and get some real-world experience.
Mocking is the only way, dude.
The only way?
The only way. Well, I have a friend who's playing fantasy for the first time. He's asking me 30 questions a day, and I told him to mock, and then he did. I got it, bro. He was like all of a sudden really high and everything. He's just like, I mocked.
Well, there you go. You got it right from the horse's mouth, or maybe from the other horse's ear. The other horse, your friend who was the original horse, they said it out of their mouth into your ear. You're also a horse in this situation. Anyway, that's it. What?
Don said it.
Yeah, Don definitely said it. All right. So for Rogers, I am Walsh. This has been the NFC North Part 2. Later podcast.
This has been Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Thanks for listening.